Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the stars through the big window. The ship was called Celestial Dawn, and it was the biggest human ship in the galaxy. Jake had been an admiral for 20 years and had seen many things, but today felt different. His aide, Captain Ben Rodriguez, walked up to him holding a datapad with new reports from across human space. The human colonial authority had been growing for over 100 years. They had made friends with hundreds of alien species by offering them technology and protection. Most aliens were happy to work with humans because humans were fair and helpful. The galaxy was more peaceful now than it had ever been before. Dr. Lisa Carter was working on a research ship called Scientific Progress. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms and cultures. Lisa had been listening to radio signals from different parts of the galaxy when she heard something that made her worry. The signals were coming from a place called the Andromeda sector, and they were not friendly. The aliens making these signals called themselves Zephyrians. They were very different from the peaceful aliens that humans usually met. The Zephyrians were warriors who believed that fighting was the only way to prove strength. They had conquered 12 star systems by attacking and destroying anyone who got in their way. War Commander Thaktor was the leader of the Zephyrian military forces. He was 8 feet tall with thick armor and carried weapons that could cut through metal. Thaktor looked at humans as weak creatures who talked too much and fought too little. He had been watching human expansion across the galaxy and thought it was time to stop them. Lisa decoded more Zephyrian messages and discovered their battle plans. The Zephyrians were planning to attack human colonies, starting with a farming world called New Geneva. This planet had 2 million human farmers and their families living there peacefully. The Zephyrians wanted to attack civilians first to make humans scared. Commander Amy Thompson ran the Human Intelligence Department. She received Lisa's report and immediately called a meeting with the senior military staff. Amy had studied many alien cultures and knew that some species could only be reasoned with through force. She hoped the Zephyrians were not one of those species. Captain Rodriguez got orders to help evacuate civilians from worlds near Zephyrian space. He was confused because the orders came with no sense of urgency. Usually when there was a military threat, the human fleet moved very quickly. This time the admiral seemed calm and almost relaxed about the whole situation. The Zephyrians had spent months studying human military tactics. They watched how humans fought and thought they had found weaknesses. Humans always tried to avoid civilian casualties and preferred to negotiate rather than fight. The Zephyrians saw this as proof that humans were cowards who would run away when faced with real warriors. Thaktor gathered his war council in a great hall on the Zephyrian homeworld. The walls were covered with weapons and trophies from their conquered enemies. He told his generals that humans were soft creatures who had never faced a real military challenge. The Zephyrians would show the galaxy what true strength looked like. The Zephyrian fleet consisted of over 5,000 warships. Each ship was built for destruction and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Their ships were painted black and red to show their enemies that death was coming. The Zephyrians had never lost a battle and did not plan to start now. Lisa continued monitoring Zephyrian communications and learned more about their culture. They believed that a warrior's honor was the most important thing in life. Surrender was considered worse than death. They expected their enemies to fight back with everything they had because anything less was shameful. Admiral Morrison called a meeting of all human ship captains in the sector. The meeting was held on a space station near the border of human space. When the captains arrived, they were surprised to see that the admiral seemed more interested in discussing supply routes than battle tactics. The Zephyrians sent their declaration of war to every human communication station in the galaxy. The message was simple and brutal. They demanded that humans surrender all their territory and dissolve their government. If humans refused, they would face total destruction. The Zephyrians gave humans exactly 72 hours to respond. The declaration was broadcast on every human world and space station. Citizens watched the message with concern, but most were not afraid. They trusted their government and military to protect them. What they did not know was that their government had been preparing for this day for a very long time. General Frank Miller sat in his office reading old military files that most people did not know existed. These files contained information about humanity's real military capabilities. The peaceful expansion across the galaxy had not happened because humans were weak. It happened because no one had ever forced humans to show their true strength. The 72 hours passed slowly. Human families continued their normal lives while their leaders made preparations that had not been used for over 200 years. Deep in secret military bases, machines began working that had been waiting patiently for someone to make the mistake the Zephyrians had just made. When the deadline expired, the Zephyrians expected either surrender or desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they received no response at all. The silence from human space confused them. They had expected fear but found nothing. This should have been their first warning that they had made a terrible mistake, but their pride would not let them see it. The human high command met in a secret room deep underground on Earth. Admiral Morrison sat at the head of a long table with the most important military leaders in human space. General Frank Miller opened a safe that had not been touched for 2 centuries and pulled out files marked with red warning labels. The files contained the real history of human expansion into space. Most people believed that humans had explored the galaxy peacefully because they were naturally diplomatic. The truth was very different. Humans had the power to destroy entire civilizations, but chose not to use it unless they had no other choice. Dr. Lisa Carter received access to the restricted archives and began reading about humanity's early space exploration. She discovered that Earth had been a violent world where humans fought terrible wars for thousands of years. By the time humans reached the stars, they had learned to build weapons that could destroy planets. The peaceful colonization program was not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate choice. Human leaders decided that it was better to make friends than to rule through fear. They offered technology and protection to alien species because cooperation was more efficient than conquest. Colonel Sam Johnson worked in a military facility that most humans did not know existed. When General Miller gave him the order, he activated Protocol 7 for the first time in his career. Across human space, hidden factories began producing weapons and ships using technology that had been kept secret for generations. Captain Rodriguez watched in amazement as civilian mining ships were transformed into powerful warships in just a few hours. Automated systems that had been sleeping in asteroid belts came to life and began building fleets of ships designed for one purpose only. The transformation was so fast that it seemed like magic. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians launched their first attack on New Geneva as planned. War Commander Thaktor led the assault personally, expecting to find a farming world with minimal defenses. What he found instead changed everything he thought he knew about humans. The moment the Zephyrian fleet entered the New Geneva system, they were detected by sensors that should not have existed on a farming world. Before they could react, defensive platforms that had been hidden in asteroids and behind moons revealed themselves and opened fire. The weapons did not just destroy the Zephyrian ships. They completely vaporized them, leaving no debris behind. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Zephyrian advance fleet of 300 ships simply ceased to exist. The defensive systems then went back into hiding as if nothing had happened. Lieutenant Kate Williams was stationed on an observation post near New Geneva. She recorded the Zephyrian communications during the battle and heard something that would stay with her forever. The Zephyrian warriors were not angry or afraid. They were confused and shocked because they could not understand what had just happened to their fleet. Thaktor barely escaped the destruction of his advance fleet. He returned to Zephyrian space with news that human defenses were far more advanced than their intelligence had suggested. The Zephyrian High Council met to discuss this unexpected development, but their pride would not let them admit they had made an error. Human ships began appearing throughout Zephyrian space, but they did not attack. Instead, they observed and recorded everything. Engineer Tony Davis operated scanning equipment that could analyze alien technology from thousands of miles away. The humans were studying their enemy the same way scientists study insects. The Zephyrians tried to attack the human observation ships but found that they could not catch them. The human vessels moved in ways that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. They appeared and disappeared without warning and could not be targeted by Zephyrian weapons. Dr. Carter analyzed the data from the observation missions and made a disturbing discovery. Human technology was not just more advanced than Zephyrian science. It was so far ahead that the two civilizations might as well have been from different universes. The gap was larger than the difference between modern humans and Stone Age hunters. General Miller authorized the activation of manufacturing facilities that had been hidden on uninhabited worlds throughout human space. These factories had been built centuries ago and maintained by automated systems. They could produce enough weapons to arm 1,000 fleets in just a few days. The Zephyrians intercepted some human communications and were shocked to learn that humans considered them a minor threat. The human military was treating the Zephyrian war fleet the same way they would treat pirates or raiders. This was not the desperate struggle between equals that Thaktor had expected. Admiral Morrison sent a message to the Zephyrian leadership, offering them one last chance to surrender peacefully. The message explained that humans did not want to destroy the Zephyrian civilization, but would do so if necessary to protect innocent lives. The Zephyrians had 24 hours to decide. Commander Amy Thompson studied Zephyrian psychology reports and predicted that they would refuse the offer. Warrior cultures like the Zephyrians often preferred death to submission. She recommended that humans prepare for the worst-case scenario while hoping for the best. The 24 hours passed, and the Zephyrians gave their answer by launching attacks on 3 more human colonies. This time they targeted civilian populations, directly hoping to force humans into ground combat, where Zephyrian physical strength might give them an advantage. It was the second worst mistake they could have made. Admiral Jake Morrison decided it was time to show the Zephyrians exactly what they were facing. He authorized a demonstration of human military power that would be impossible for the Zephyrians to ignore. Jake chose the Zephyrian fortress world of Krathmar as the target. This planet was the strongest military base in Zephyrian space and was protected by over 1,000 warships. Captain Ben Rodriguez was given command of a new ship called Vengeance of Terra. The ship looked like a normal human cruiser, but it carried weapons that had never been used in battle before. Ben felt nervous because he had never been in a real war. He was used to peaceful missions like exploring new planets and helping alien colonies. Dr. Lisa Carter had been studying Zephyrian culture and psychology for weeks. She told Admiral Morrison that Zephyrians only respected overwhelming force. They were like predator animals that would only back down when they faced something much stronger than themselves. Lisa recommended that the human demonstration had to be so powerful that the Zephyrians would understand that continued fighting was hopeless. Commander Amy Thompson agreed with Lisa's analysis. Amy had studied many warrior cultures throughout galactic history. She said that showing mercy to proud warriors often made them fight harder because they saw mercy as weakness. The only way to end the war quickly was to demonstrate such overwhelming power that even the bravest Zephyrian would realize that victory was impossible. The human fleet approached Krathmar with 50 ships. To the Zephyrians, this looked like a small force that could be easily defeated. War Commander Thaktor had over 1,000 ships defending his fortress world, plus orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapons. He was confident that he could destroy the human fleet and prove that Zephyrians were still the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Engineer Tony Davis was aboard the flagship working with weapons he had only read about in classified files. The humans were about to deploy something called Stellar Reapers. These weapons did not attack ships or planets directly. Instead, they could manipulate the forces that held stars together. Tony felt scared by the power he was about to unleash. Admiral Morrison sent a final message to War Commander Thaktor before beginning the demonstration. Jake offered the Zephyrians one last chance to surrender and join the human alliance as honored allies. He promised that Zephyrian warriors would be given important roles protecting frontier colonies, and their culture would be respected. Thaktor responded by ordering his entire fleet to attack the human ships. The battle began with over 1,000 Zephyrian ships charging toward 50 human vessels. The Zephyrians fired every weapon they had while screaming war cries over their radio channels. They expected to overwhelm the humans with superior numbers and destroy the small human fleet in minutes. Tony Davis activated the Stellar Reapers from his control station. The weapon sent invisible energy beams toward Krathmar's star. The beams did not destroy the star, but they changed the way it worked. Within minutes, the star began producing massive solar flares that spread out in all directions. The solar flares reached the Zephyrian fleet first. The energy from the flares did not hurt the Zephyrian warriors, but it disabled every electronic system in their ships. Weapons stopped working, engines shut down, and even basic life support systems failed. Within an hour, over 1,000 powerful warships became helpless metal shells drifting in space. The same thing happened to the orbital defense platforms around Krathmar. The massive weapons that could destroy entire fleets became silent and dark. On the planet's surface, every military base lost power. Computers stopped working, vehicles would not start, and even simple radios went silent. Lieutenant Kate Williams led a boarding party to one of the disabled Zephyrian ships. Kate and her team used small shuttles to fly between the drifting warships. When they entered the Zephyrian vessels, they found the alien warriors sitting in the dark looking confused and frightened. The Zephyrians could not understand how their technology had been turned off without being destroyed. Kate spoke to the Zephyrian warriors using a translation device. She explained that human weapons had disabled their star and that the effect would last for several days. The Zephyrians asked how it was possible to turn off a star without destroying it. Kate said that humans had learned to manipulate the basic forces of the universe during their long history of warfare. War Commander Thaktor was trapped on his flagship along with his officers. The mighty Death's Edge was now just a dark metal shell floating helplessly in space. Thaktor had never felt so powerless in his entire life. His warriors looked to him for leadership, but he had no idea how to fight an enemy that could control stars. Admiral Morrison sent a message to the Zephyrian leadership using emergency communication systems that still worked. Jake's voice was calm and patient as he spoke to the alien warriors. He said this demonstration was just a tiny sample of human military capabilities. He offered the Zephyrians one final chance to surrender before humanity was forced to use weapons that would make stellar manipulation look like a children's toy. The message included technical data about how the stellar reapers worked. Human scientists had learned to create controlled disruptions in stellar magnetic fields. This caused the star to release electromagnetic pulses that disabled all technology in the star system. The process was completely reversible and did not harm any living beings. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored Zephyrian communications during the aftermath of the demonstration. She heard Zephyrian officers discussing whether they should surrender or continue fighting. Some warriors said they would rather die than submit to any other species. Others argued that it was foolish to fight an enemy that could disable entire star systems. General Frank Miller prepared for the next phase of operations while waiting for the Zephyrian response. Frank had hoped that the demonstration would be enough to end the war without more bloodshed. He remembered the last time humans had been forced to use their most powerful weapons, and he did not want to see that happen again. War. Commander Thaktor sat in the darkness of his disabled ship and tried to understand what had happened. His entire fleet had been neutralized without a single shot being fired at his ships. The humans had demonstrated the ability to manipulate forces that the Zephyrians did not even know existed. For the first time in his life, Thaktor began to wonder if his species had made a terrible mistake. The human fleet remained in position around Krathmar, waiting for a response from the Zephyrian government. Admiral Morrison gave them 24 hours to make their decision. He hoped they would choose surrender, because the alternative would be the complete destruction of their civilization. The next demonstration would not be as gentle as turning off their technology. The 24-hour deadline was approaching, and the Zephyrian High Council was meeting an emergency session on their homeworld of Zeph Prime. War Commander Thaktor had been brought back from his disabled ship to attend the meeting. He sat at the council table with his officers and looked at the faces of the most powerful Zephyrians in their empire. War. Priestess Nalathek was the only Zephyrian who had spent time studying human history and culture. She was smaller than the male warriors, but her intelligence was respected by all Zephyrians. Nalathek stood up and showed the council information she had gathered about previous species that had challenged humanity. She displayed images of 3 civilizations that no longer existed. The Kethari Empire had been a proud military culture similar to the Zephyrians. They had controlled 50 star systems and commanded millions of warriors. The Draconian Confederacy had been even larger with advanced technology and powerful fleets. The silicon-based crystalline collective had been the most advanced species humans had ever encountered. Nalathek explained that all 3 species had made the same mistake as the Zephyrians. They had seen human peaceful expansion and assumed it meant humans were weak. Each species had declared war on humanity expecting easy victory. All 3 civilizations had been completely destroyed, and their homeworlds were now empty space. War Commander Thaktor argued that Zephyrians were different from those extinct species. He said Zephyrian warriors were braver and stronger than any aliens who had ever lived. He would rather see every Zephyrian die in battle than surrender to humans or any other species. Many of the younger warriors agreed with Thaktor and shouted war cries. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Carter was working with Professor Alan White to study classified human military archives. Professor White was a military historian who had access to files that most humans never saw. He showed Lisa records of the 3 extinct civilizations and explained what had happened to them when they refused to surrender. The Gathari Empire had been given multiple chances to surrender, but their warrior pride made them continue fighting. Humans had finally used weapons that removed all the electrons from atoms in the Cathari home system. Everything in 50 star systems had simply fallen apart at the atomic level. Planets, stars, and even empty space had been reduced to fundamental particles. General Frank Miller authorized the deployment of humanity's most advanced spy technology to watch the Zephyrian Council meeting. Captain Nancy Turner piloted a stealth ship that could become invisible and listen to conversations from light years away. The ship used quantum sensors that could detect individual thoughts if needed. Nancy's ship detected that the Zephyrian population was divided into 2 groups. About half wanted to surrender and save their species from extinction. The other half preferred to die fighting rather than submit to any other species. The younger warriors mostly wanted to continue the war, while older Zephyrians were more willing to consider surrender. Admiral Jake Morrison decided to make one final personal appeal to the Zephyrian leadership. He opened a direct communication channel to the council chamber on Zeph Prime. Jake's image appeared as a hologram in front of the assembled Zephyrian leaders. He spoke in a calm and respectful voice. Jake explained that humanity did not want to destroy the Zephyrian species. He said humans respected warrior cultures and would be honored to have Zephyrian fighters as allies. He offered to make Zephyrians the protectors of human frontier colonies, where their fighting skills would be valued and needed. Zephyrian culture and traditions would be preserved and respected. The offer came with conditions. The Zephyrians would have to stop attacking human colonies and release any prisoners they had taken. They would also have to accept human authority in matters of interstellar law and trade. In return, they would be given important roles in defending human space and would receive advanced technology to improve their worlds. War Commander Thaktor stood up and rejected Admiral Morrison's offer. He said no true Zephyrian warrior would ever serve under alien command. He declared that Zephyrians would fight to the last warrior rather than become servants of another species. Thaktor challenged Jake Morrison to single combat with the fate of both civilizations depending on the outcome. Admiral Morrison surprised everyone by accepting the challenge. However, he proposed a different type of combat. Instead of physical fighting, he suggested a contest of strategic thinking and tactical planning. He said true strength came from wisdom and intelligence, not just physical power. The contest would test which leader could better protect their people. Thaktor was confused by this proposal because Zephyrians had always settled disputes through physical combat. War Priestess Nalathek whispered to him that accepting a mental contest might give the Zephyrians a chance to avoid total destruction. She argued that if Thaktor could prove Zephyrian tactical thinking was superior, then humans might respect them more. Commander Amy Thompson watched the exchange from the human flagship. She understood that Admiral Morrison was trying to give the Zephyrians a way to surrender, without losing too much honor. By proposing a contest of minds instead of bodies, he was showing respect for Zephyrian intelligence while avoiding the need for more violence. Dr. Lisa Carter realized that the strategic contest was actually a psychological trap. If Thaktor agreed to the contest, he would be admitting that intelligence was more important than physical strength. This would go against everything Zephyrian culture believed. If he refused the contest, he would look afraid to compete with human thinking. Engineer Tony Davis began preparing the most terrible weapons in the human arsenal while waiting for the Zephyrian response. These were weapons that had only been used 3 times in human history. Tony hoped he would not have to activate them because once these weapons were used, there would be no way to reverse their effects. The Zephyrian Council argued for hours about how to respond to Admiral Morrison's challenge. The younger warriors wanted to reject any contest that did not involve fighting. The older leaders understood that this might be their last chance to save their species from extinction. War Priestess Nalathek begged the council to consider surrender. As the deadline approached, War Commander Thaktor made his final decision. He was influenced by the youngest and most aggressive warriors in his army. These warriors had never known defeat and could not imagine their mighty empire being destroyed by any enemy. Thaktor chose pride over survival and rejected both the surrender offer and the strategic contest. Instead, he ordered a desperate final attack on human civilian targets, hoping to force humans into a ground war where Zephyrian physical superiority might give them an advantage. The 24-hour deadline passed without a Zephyrian surrender. War Commander Thaktor had chosen to continue the war, despite all the warnings from human leaders. Instead of accepting the peaceful offer or the strategic contest, he ordered his remaining forces to attack human civilian colonies. Thaktor believed that killing innocent humans would force humanity to fight a ground war, where Zephyrian warriors might have an advantage. The Zephyrian attack hit the peaceful colony world of Paradise Valley. This planet was home to farming families who grew food for other human worlds. The colonists had no military defenses because Paradise Valley had always been far from any danger. When the Zephyrian ships arrived, they began bombing cities and farms without warning. Over 50,000 human civilians died in the attack. Families with children were killed while trying to escape in their vehicles. Hospitals and schools were deliberately targeted by Zephyrian warriors who wanted to cause maximum suffering. The attack was broadcast across human space so that everyone could see what the Zephyrians had done. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the reports from Paradise Valley with tears in his eyes. Jake had spent his entire career trying to avoid exactly this kind of tragedy. He had offered the Zephyrians every possible chance for peace, but they had chosen to murder innocent families instead. Jake's sadness slowly turned to cold anger as he realized what he had to do next. Jake opened the most classified safe in human military history and removed authorization codes that had not been used for over 200 years. He sent a secure message to Earth requesting permission to activate Protocol Zero. This was the highest level of military response that humanity possessed. Protocol Zero had only been used 3 times, and each time an entire alien civilization had ceased to exist. Dr. Lisa Carter received access to files about Protocol Zero that made her feel sick with fear. She learned that humans had developed weapons that could unravel the basic forces holding matter together. These weapons did not just destroy objects. They made matter stop existing by breaking the atomic bonds that held everything in the universe together. Engineer Tony Davis was ordered to activate the entropy cascade weapons. Tony had read about these devices in theoretical papers, but he had never imagined he would have to use them. The weapons worked by sending energy waves that disrupted the forces holding atoms together. Anything touched by these waves would simply fall apart at the most basic level of reality. General Frank Miller gave the order to deploy the human fleet to every star system controlled by the Zephyrians. The ships did not carry normal weapons. Instead, they were equipped with devices that could affect the fabric of space itself. Frank felt terrible about what was going to happen, but the Zephyrians had made their choice when they killed innocent families. The human fleet did not attack Zephyrian ships or planets directly. Instead, they targeted the empty space around each Zephyrian star system. Tony Davis activated the entropy cascade weapons from his control station aboard the flagship. The weapons sent invisible energy waves into the space surrounding Zephyrian worlds. What happened next was the most terrifying display of power in galactic history. The energy waves reached the first Zephyrian star system and began to unravel the atomic structure of everything they touched. Planets did not explode. They simply stopped existing as their atoms fell apart. Stars went dark as their nuclear fires were extinguished at the fundamental level. Captain Nancy Turner's reconnaissance ship recorded the destruction from a safe distance. She watched entire worlds disappear, leaving behind nothing but empty space where planets and moons had once orbited. The process was completely silent because there was no explosion. Matter simply ceased to exist as the forces holding it together were torn apart. Within 6 hours, 12 Zephyrian star systems had been erased from existence. Billions of Zephyrian warriors and civilians simply stopped existing along with their planets and ships. The Zephyrian Empire that had conquered dozens of worlds and controlled vast fleets was reduced to empty space where nothing remained. War Commander Thaktor was aboard his flagship in the last surviving Zephyrian system when he received reports of what was happening. His officers told him that entire star systems were disappearing from their sensors. Thaktor could not understand how weapons could make stars and planets stop existing without leaving any debris behind. In his final transmission, Thaktor admitted that his species had made a terrible mistake. He said the Zephyrians had thought they were the strongest warriors in the galaxy, but they had never imagined facing enemies who could control the basic forces of reality. Thaktor apologized for the attack on Paradise Valley and acknowledged that his pride had doomed his entire civilization. The last Zephyrian star system disappeared from existence 24 hours after the attack on Paradise Valley. The energy waves reached Zeph Prime and erased the Zephyrian homeworld, along with every ship and warrior that remained. War Commander. Thaktor and his entire species simply stopped existing as the entropy cascade weapons completed their work. Professor Alan White updated the classified archives to record the complete destruction of the fourth alien civilization that had challenged humanity. He wrote that the Zephyrians had been given multiple opportunities to surrender, but had chosen extinction instead. Their fate would serve as a warning to any future species that might consider threatening human civilians. Admiral Morrison sealed the Protocol Zero authorization codes for another century. He hoped they would never be needed again, but humanity would keep these terrible weapons ready in case another species made the same mistake as the Zephyrians. Jake felt no pride in what had happened, only sadness that such destruction had been necessary. Dr. Lisa Carter compiled a final report about the Zephyrian War for the Galactic Database. She wrote that humanity's true strength had never been in their weapons, but in their restraint. Humans preferred peace and cooperation, but they possessed the power to unmake reality itself when pushed beyond their limits. The Zephyrians had not been destroyed by human cruelty, but by their own inability to recognize when they faced an opponent, whose mercy was their most dangerous characteristic. The galaxy received a simple message from human leadership after the Zephyrian civilization was erased. Humanity preferred peaceful cooperation and offered friendship to all species willing to work together for mutual benefit. However, any species that chose to threaten human civilians would discover why humans were the only species to have survived their homeworld's violent evolution and become masters of forces that could unmake creation itself. 5 years later, the space where the Zephyrian Empire had existed was declared a memorial zone. Human ships would patrol the empty systems to ensure that the beauty of space was preserved, even though the worlds that once orbited there had chosen destruction over cooperation. The memorial served as a reminder that in the vast cosmos, wisdom and restraint were far more powerful than any weapon. The Zephyrians became the last species to challenge humanity, because every other alien civilization learned from their fate. The galaxy remained peaceful not because humanity ruled through fear, but because every species understood that cooperation offered infinite possibilities, while conflict with humans offered only endings. The last species that challenged humanity had faced total annihilation, and their empty star systems stood as eternal proof that some challenges should never be made.